Well, welcome back to Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr. Tony G. Alvarado. I am glad to have you with us again for another transforming conversation, which I believe today's conversation will be very, very transformational. We'll be right back in just a moment to introduce our guest for this week. So stay tuned right after this. All right, I have in the podcast studio with me today a mentor, a friend, now colleague, Dr. Cheryl Bridges Johns. Cheryl, let me introduce you to her formally, and then I'll share some informal things about her that I love. All right, so Cheryl is a prophetic voice advocating for the renewal of the church, the care of creation, women's full empowerment, and the reenactment of the Bible. Cheryl's academic career has spanned 33 years. She has distinguished herself as a writer, lecturer, and leader in the academy. She is a Henry Luce III Fellow in Theology and past president of the Society for Pentecostal Studies. Cheryl loves preaching and teaching the Bible. Areas of academic interest for Cheryl are women's studies, feminist theology, Pentecostal theology, creational theology, and the practice of ministry. Most often you will find Cheryl on Twitter, but she recently decided to act her age and rejoin Facebook. She's too vain for the vanity of Instagram, is what she says. Cheryl is a wise elder with a burden for those deconstructing toxic aspects of their faith. She seeks to offer a way to be claimed again beyond the wilderness of criticism. I love that. Cheryl's latest book, which is what we will be discussing today, 7 Transforming Gifts of Menopause. I want you to know that this book is very enlightening, and this will be the topic of our conversation on today. Her latest book, 7 Transforming Gifts of Menopause, an Unexpected Spiritual Journey, goes far beyond hot flashes and gets to the very heart of the midlife journey, helping women find their unique voice and speaking their truth in the era of the Me Too and the Church Too age. Coming alongside readers as a wise spiritual guide, pastor and theologian, Cheryl identifies 7 key developmental tasks of menopause and gives practical ways women can embrace each one. She encourages women to view these tasks as gifts as they experience the remarkable physical, emotional, and spiritual transformation that occurs in this stage of life. And I want you to know how I came into relationship with Cheryl. I call her Dr. Cheryl because I came into relationship with her during my seminary journey at the then Church of God Theological Seminary, now Pentecostal Theological Seminary. Cheryl was one of my beloved professors and teachers during my MDiv degree training there, Master of Divinity degree that I took at that particular program that I studied at that particular seminary in Cleveland, Tennessee. And during that stage of my formation as a minister, as a pastor, as a preacher, particularly woman in ministry, Cheryl came into my life at a very critical stage as I was identifying my voice and clarifying my voice in the pulpit and in the larger body of Christ, and now even in the world. And she served as my MDiv mentor. She was the oversight for my thesis. there, and I studied Christian formation and discipleship under her, and I took such courses as human growth and transformation. That was one of my favorite courses that I took with Cheryl. And then other courses that I took in the Gospel of Mark. I remember taking that course with her, the book of Amos with her. So many times that we talked and we shared, and then in subsequent years, Cheryl has brought me back to the seminary to co-teach with her. One of my favorite courses that I've taught with her is the course Finding Voice, women finding their voices in preaching. And so she is well read. She is published in so many areas. She is a theologian, and she is a sister and a friend, an ally. This podcast has been dedicated to women of color. And I have to say, we've not had any women outside of women of color as guests on this podcast. And I love Cheryl because she loves Black women and we love her. And I call her a friend and an ally to women of color. She is definitely one who hears the voices from the margins, and she appreciates the voices from the margins, and she allows herself to be taught and informed and transformed by those voices. And so I thought it not robbery to invite Cheryl to be a part of our conversation today. And I hope that you will enjoy our conversation and that you'll be transformed as we discuss her book, as we discuss life, as we discuss what is menopause and the gifts that menopause brings to us as we age, women. Last week, my guest, Sheila Agnew, we talked about fitness for women 50 plus. And many of the guests that I bring on here are women in their 50s and their 60s. And my guest last week is 70 years old. And so I am finding that women in our 50s and 60s and 70s and even 80s and 90s, we are discovering that we can live until we die. Our life does not end when we turn 50. Our lives do not end when we go through menopause. Our lives do not end when we raise children and they leave home and marry, go away to college. Our lives do not end when we bury our mothers and our fathers and our loved ones. And so I'm so grateful to Cheryl for joining me in today's conversation. Will you help me welcome Dr. Cheryl Bridges-Johns to the Harmonize Your Life podcast? Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Dr. Tony Alvarado. It's good to be here today with you. You're one of my favorite people. I've often said that I'd like to be you when I grow up. It's like if I need a life coach, and I would look to you for that. So I so admire you, and many, many, many gifts that you have. It's just multiple gifts, and I'm excited what God is doing in this phase of your life, and anxious to see this new phase that's coming too.
Thank you. Thank you for being a part of my journey and my formation.
It's been an honor.
A part of my spiritual formation, a part of my ministry formation, a part of my formation as a woman and a wife, mother. I don't have grandchildren yet, but I imagine I can learn some things about that too from you.
Oh, there's no greater joy. They're great.
I follow you on Twitter, and you don't post as much on Facebook, but you and I connect with you mainly on Twitter, and I see you posting those pictures with your grandchildren and all of that. And I told my daughter in love and my son the other day, okay, y'all, I need y'all. I'm ready for some grandchildren. I need y'all to get busy.
Yeah, there is nothing like it. We just had 2 full weeks of grandchildren. But the thing is, you can say goodbye as I did this morning, and we'll see you soon. So there's that wonderful phase that you get to really enjoy.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Good. Well, Cheryl, I brought you on because I've been reading your book, and it's very, very good. I appreciate this book, and I wanted you to share your story a little bit and why you're passionate about helping women navigate their journey pre and during and even after menopause. So talk to us. What was your motivation for writing this book in particular? Of all the books, I have to say, when I saw the title of this book and saw that you've written, you know, I have several of your work, articles particularly that you've written in ministry and preaching. And this is a different kind of book for you.
It is. Yeah.
This is different.
The one I'm working on now is about scripture. So but it is a sense of, as you said, you took human growth and transformation with me. And I've always been interested in developmental psychology and women's development and women's studies. And you have a degree in that. So I, going through my own menopausal journey, I realized how few resources Christian women had. And then the ones that I found, they were not helpful in some ways. They, would tell you to suck it up and pray harder, or it was just not good. So I remember saying to my husband, I think when I get through this, I'll look at this time as a gift. And he said, well, then write a book about that when you get through. So I said, all right, I will. And it's a women's spirituality, women's health, and women's psychosocial development all come together in this book. And it's not so much a book about hormones and all that other stuff, which I talk about, diet, hormones, but there are a lot of books out there that you can get on that. But there are fewer books on the psychosocial dynamics and the opportunities to be transformed into grow. And a lot of women age, but they never mature. They just updated versions of their younger self. And I believe that God ordained women to have this time to almost like a cocoon to, shelter in a while and then be transformed into this. Because the second half of life is often the most full of life. And this, Margaret Mead called it postmenopausal zest. And it's a lot of women run for political office or do other things and second half of life. And we live longer now. And we have opportunities in the second half to not be just a replica of the earlier. And you mentioned about life not being over at 50 or whatever. And there was a phrase that was common, even in my childhood, that menopause was the death of the woman in the woman. And it was like once she was no longer able to bear children, what good was she? And therefore, she was just waiting to die, kind of hanging around, put her in the corner till she dies. And that's not true at all. This is not the death of the woman in the woman. It's more like the second birth of the woman.
Yeah, I like that. Not the death of the woman, but the second birth of the woman. That means a lot, I'm glad you said it like that, because one of the things that I appreciate about this book, this book that you've written, is that you shifted our paradigm and when I read this, you helped to shift my paradigm on menopause. Building on the work, some of the scholars that you and psychologists and medical doctors that you built on. You mentioned Gail Shebe and her book Menopause: The Silent Passage. You mentioned Christine Northrup, who specializes in women's health, and her book The Wisdom of Menopause. And I really appreciated that you pulled in an African American scholar, Carolyn Scott Brown, and her book The Black Women's Guide to Menopause. And that really, I was like, thank you for bringing her perspective to the table in this book. But in building on their work and in reading your work, you shifted my mindset away from menopause being this dreadful experience to a place of transformation,
Mm-hmm.
And a freeing space for women.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so for you to say it's not the death of the woman, but it's the second birth of the woman, that's a paradigm shift. That's a different way of looking at menopause.
Oh, yeah. It's a real paradigm shift. And what I've discovered, though, is that there's still just a lot of taboo and people are reluctant to talk about it. And we're living in 2021, but it's still a topic that not many people feel comfortable talking about. You know, they'll talk about sex or anything, but they won't talk about menopause. So, and you know, if it makes,
and if we do talk about it, we hear about it in such a negative way.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So like, you know, we'll hear about the night sweats. We hear about the hot flashes. We hear about, you know, the not being able to sleep. You know what I'm saying? The mood swings.
Yes,
and
yes.
things of that nature, or the heavy cycle, you know, before our cycle disappears. But you know what I'm saying? But it's before it ceases. But we don't hear the gifts that come in it. And that's what this did for me. Those gifts that you say, that you pull out, the spiritual insight that you give, the prophetic insight that you give to help us see how freeing this stage of our lives can be.
Oh yeah, yes, very freeing. But it's a crucible. It's there's a reason people don't talk about it. There's a reason that people that women try to get as many hormones in their body as possible. It's a crucible. It is a form of death. And so many women lose the opportunity for the rebirth. And that's what I've been trying to help women in is, yeah, it's going to be rough. And for some women, it's not. And I bless those women. But for others, it is. But it's worth the pain. It's kind of like giving birth. And you just have to ride the waves and go with it and give birth to your new self through it.
Wow. Give birth to your new self through it. So how do we do that, Cheryl?
Well, you know, identify these 7 gifts. The first gift is uncovering. And I call that in the sense that when we go through puberty, women get drugged. We get this dose of estrogen, progesterone, and this lovely dance in our body. And it makes us into these wonderful human beings who love and nurture and nest and care and want to get married and have children and all of the things that are just delightful in our lives. And women at this stage become adept at letting things go, getting offended, but we can easily just put things off and let it go. And but things hidden stay. You know, the quote there: "Things buried alive stay alive." And it's during that early adulthood when we're so busy with other things that we don't notice the things we're burying. And that when we have this, what I call this storm of perimenopause, the shifts in the hormonal balance, that lovely dance dissipates. And even as Christiane Northrup says, parts of our brain are triggered that uncover memories and also anger. So we're dealing with memories, we're dealing with anger, and they just start coming up.
And the stuff that we've covered because we've gotten so busy with life, with having children, raising children, marriage, ministry, whatever, the gathering season of our life.
Yeah, and they're just down there in the deep caverns of our psyche, hanging out, waiting for their moment. And then the moment comes, and I say in the book, the 7-year-old girl that won't stop talking, and she's going to run the world and run for president. And then you meet her at 14 and she's hesitant and she's somehow very insecure, and you wonder what happened. Well, the 7-year-old just sort of went down in the cavern somewhere, and but she comes back at 50 and she's got issues, and she's like, I'm back and you're going to deal with me now. And I was sassy before and I'm going to be sassy again. And so that uncovering is a gift. And I have a section in that chapter on trauma that women who have had trauma in their childhood and who have experienced it in their young adulthood will have more difficulty. There's studies that I cite there. Normally will have more difficulty in perimenopause. It will be rougher. Okay. And I talk in this section about racial-based trauma. And women who experience racial-based trauma on a daily basis, even in microaggressions, have more difficult time in perimenopause. As a matter of fact, for Black women, it's longer to go through it than other, maybe Anglo women. And there's epigenetic studies about your great-grandmother's trauma. It's kind of like silt in your psyche, and it's clogging things up, and you don't know where it came from, but it came from her trauma. And we inherit so much of the past that we're not even aware of. And Lisa Sharon Harper, I use her as an illustration in the book. She sat with me, Zoomed with me and helped me uncover or talk about Black women and racial-based trauma and her experiences of coming into her own voice, finding herself. So I would hope that section of that chapter on the gift of uncovering could be helpful for women of color.
So it helped. I'm sure the whole in reading your book, it gives us at least some understanding of and maybe when you say it comes across maybe in a different way for Black women than it does Anglo women in terms of that because of the trauma that we have inherited.
Yeah.
From our grandmothers and mothers.
Yeah.
We inherited. And so so the whole, it could be, you said that season could be longer and more difficult for women of color. Okay. Wow. So one of the things that you talk about in your book, Cheryl, one of the things I appreciated was how each gift tend to, as it's unwrapped, leads to a new gift.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk to us about where do we go from the uncovering? What gift can we unwrap next?
Yeah, well, that uncovering is a rough ride. I call it like the storm that just uncovers things. And then there is this gift that comes that we don't see as a gift, is anger. And there's
you mean anger can be a gift?
Yeah, and I've used some of resources on anger and women's anger. When I first started writing the book years ago, there weren't a lot of resources on women's anger. But in the last several years, there are some great anger. This quote I give from Maya Angelou: "You should be angry. Use that anger. You write it. You paint it, you dance it, you march it, you say it, in other words, anger is use that anger.
Use that anger. Yeah. And really, the Bible is clear to be angry and sin not. It doesn't say don't be angry. It just says be angry and sin not, which suggests to me when some people say, well, I'm angry. Okay, good. Now, what is that anger going to produce? What can you do with that anger? You should be angry about some things, and it should prompt us to do something about what we're angry about.
Yes.
And so righteous anger, especially,
it's a power.
It's good. It's power, and own it. So for us as Black women, we get stereotyped with being the angry Black woman.
Yeah, I talk about that in that chapter some. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So what can we do about that? I mean, in your estimation, from your seat where you're sitting.
Well, there's the whole thing that a
I
lot of
mean,
times
about being
with
stereotyped.
men, they put them in anger management. You've heard those terms.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But the book that I read, and I use in here, I forgot the name of the author. She talks about anger competency. And I love that term, competency, so that we learn to harness that power to become more competent people who will take our stand, who will be more assertive, who will speak our truth. We don't have to scream or yell, but we can take that anger and then use that power in righteous and holy ways to help heal the world. And if it gets bottled up, what happens is it becomes toxic poison in our body. Our bodies begin, we eat the anger, we absorb that anger in other ways with drugs or overeating or alcohol or binging on whatever. But to use that anger in a competent way, I think and I give steps in there on how to do that.
Can you just give us a couple of those steps here?
Yeah. In terms of using that anger, I say, develop anger competency. I say to women that you understand first that it's power.
Okay.
And to do that is to begin to see yourself not as managing the anger as much or as repressing, but being competent in that. I talk about seeing a therapist.
Yes.
Very important, I believe. Journaling is a good place in which you can put your thoughts out in a safe space. And group discussion, group podcasts such as this help us to know how to deal with that anger and how to deal with it in terms of pushback and aggression. Doesn't have to be a bad word. I use the work here of Chamali, who says that you can have aggression and it still be respectful in terms of standing your ground and being a person who will not yield. Women are expected, Black women especially, people of color, to yield the room, to yield the space, to yield the microphone, to yield the pulpit. And it's okay to say, I will not yield the space.
Yeah. I own this space, and I will not yield. I won't count, towel down. I won't, I'm going to own who I am, and I'm going to own this space that I'm in. And I call it, for me, my whole self-care thing is that owning that space. It's the reclaiming of my body. It's the reclaiming of my mind. It's the reclaiming of my spirit. It's the resistance to the culture. It's the resistance to what says can't be done. You know what I'm saying? It's
of that. Oh, goodness,
it's taking the anger and turning it into something positive, not only for me, but then also it becomes a tributary or stream or river to refresh other people and help them in managing their anger and developing this anger competency. I love the way you put that. Develop an anger competency. Identifying where the anger comes from, I'm sure, is a major aspect of that, and that's why therapy helps us to kind of identify that. Yeah. One of the gifts that I was most struck by the gift. Let's see here, the whole gift of uncovering. But the other gift that I love was, we talk about the gift of anger, and it was, let me find it here, the gift of the authentic self. That was so good for me. We were talking earlier before we came on live onto the podcast, and I was saying to you how I'm in a redefinition of myself right now. And you was talking about my hair, and you were saying, you like my hair, and I was saying to you, this whole hair, this natural hair journey is a part of my self-acceptance. And for us as African American women, our hair is an issue. It has become a major issue. It's a psychosocial thing. It's a psychological thing. It's a mental health issue for many of us. And particularly in menopause, where some women are experiencing baldness or their hair is thinning and things of that nature. And so for me, the reclaiming of accepting my natural hair pattern, my natural curl pattern is a part of that gift of the authentic self.
Yeah. And that's an external expression of what's going on inside of you. And Harriet Lerner, she's in her book on women, she says that at midlife, some women are depleted selves, that we have given so much, a piece of ourself out, to the degree that by 50 we're depleted. And the goal then is to re-self, as you were talking, what you're doing. And re-selfing, it to me is like the second birth of the self.
Okay.
And allowing the self to be born, that self that went down into those caverns of our psyche, letting her come out and stretch her legs and find her voice and be herself again. When we were 6 and 7, we didn't notice so much about our bodies and we were just more, we didn't sort of like have this body managing our body. And we were in a body, and our body was an expression of who we were. Now, women are taught to have their body as an expression of who others want them to be, and how the mirroring that goes on, and all of the drama with that. And body acceptance is a new frontier for us, and it's such an important frontier. And if we can't accept ourselves in our own body, in our own hair, our own whatever we have, then we really cannot be authentic selves.
So let me ask you this, Cheryl, because you and I are Christian women, and we've grown up in church cultures under different teachings and theological bents and traditions. So when we talk about things like self-care and the rebirthing of the self, and developing our authentic self and our authentic voice, all that stuff, what do you say to, because 20, 30 years ago, we weren't hearing it. We're not hearing this in church.
No. And
so,
go ahead.
Okay, so, and as you're a pastor, I'm a pastor, we're in ministry. I mean, what do you say to the Christian woman who is listening to us, or the Christian man that may be listening to us, or just the society that's listening to us, about all this self stuff, because we Christians, we're not supposed to be about the self, remember?
Right.
We're supposed to be
crucified. We were told, and I believe, and we have to separate this from narcissism. And narcissism is rampant in our society. And we're not asking to be narcissist and self-centered. We're just asking women to be at peace with themselves. And that is often not the case for many women. And when I was doing this research, I came across this blog by this woman. I think she calls herself the Peaceful Wife or something. Anyway, and she said, now when you get at menopause, you may want to start focusing on yourself, but don't do it. Just keep giving. And I thought that's That's a terrible thing to say, because what God has done is that he's designed us at this time, this developmental window, for the rebirthing of ourselves. It's a gift from God. He says to us, I'm taking down all your defenses. I'm making it really hard for you right now not to be angry. And I am kind of like supercharging your body here to take attention to yourself. And that is God's gift, is to reclaim what was lost, what was once disabused, what was once just hidden and wrecked by life sometimes. And you know how we're tender with a newborn baby. I encourage women at this stage of life, be tender with that self that's trying to come out of hiding. She is hesitant, and if you're tender to her, she may start speaking to you and telling you what she wants to do with the next part of her life and what she thinks about things. And you know, don't be the nice girl who grows up to be the good woman. You know, nice girls turn into good women.
Josh, you trying to get us put out of church, girl. You trying to get us put out.
You know, just out. Patriarchs love good women.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Become the dangerously godly, authentic woman that the Ezer woman out of Genesis that God has created us to be. The devil woman, you know, become that woman that is in there, but she's been told, you know, in the first half of life, we learn to live in what Richard Rohr calls the holding containers. In church, what you're talking about, they give you the holding container. Here it is. This is what you're supposed to do and be. But it's easier for men to break out of those holding containers. We even applaud them like they're pioneers or something. But for women to do it, oh, hell can break loose on that. You know, you don't know the place, you don't, you know, you're uppity, and so we have to find the voices that will call out that authentic self, and then not listen to those voices that are saying, don't go beyond these boundaries. Don't go that way. We've never, you know, you shouldn't be there. And often those negative voices are other women.
Well, now you've said a mouthful right there.
I know. Yeah.
Some of the keepers of Yolanda Pierce in her book, In My Grandmother's House, and she talks about some of the main keepers of patriarchy are women.
Yes, that delightful book. And it because there's bonus points in keeping patriarchy alive. And I believe that for women of color, Black women, having discussions with men, I don't think that patriarchy is a short-term solution for Black men.
No.
I heard a guy say that, and I saw Yolanda Pierce shake her head when he said that. No. Because once you kind of get that power over women, it's hard to just say, well, this is a short term, we'll give it to you later. But it's shared power is always better in the long run. It's just the stewarding of the earth together, the stewarding of the nation, the caring for churches, the caring for families and homes. All of it's just better together.
It's better together. Cheryl, you have 7 gifts, and we've only talked about 2 of them. We talked about the gift of anger, the gift of the authentic self, and the uncovering.
We talked about 3.
Uncovering 3 of them. We talked about 3 of them. You have others. The gift of spiritual freedom, the gift of expanded time, the gift of spiritual freedom. Name all 7 of them for us.
Yeah, the gift of uncovering, and then the gift of anger. And then that leads us after anger. Let me make sure I get this sequence right. So there's the authentic self that comes after the gift of anger there. And then following that is the gift of expanded time.
Expanded time.
I just
Yeah.
had so much fun writing that chapter. Now, women are keepers of cyclical time. We're lunar creatures.
That's the word. Yeah. Expanded time. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's men have been mainly involved in historical linear time, but menopause opens the door for women to go into linear time, but hold on to the beauty and the rhythms of cyclical time, Sabbath, and rest, and seasons. But then know that you're not tied to the menstrual cycle, childbirth cycle, this cycle, that you're now freed in some ways. You become more masculine in some ways to enter into the space of masculine time. But that doesn't mean that you don't continue to honor and nurture cyclical time.
Right.
And then there's the gift that I have here after that of vision.
Okay.
Now you got time. Now, wait a minute, spiritual freedom, which is an important thing. Like I was just talking about some of those spiritual holding containers. And my goodness, that's the hard chapter, I think, for women who have been told that God wants them to be this way. And then they begin to deconstruct that. And it's terrifying because it feels like you're not pleasing God by this. So I try to help walk women through how to find spiritual freedom, and then find their vision, which is just kind of take you on a vision quest, Native American spirituality, the vision quest. And I think menopause is sort of a built-in vision quest. We have no sweat lodge, but we have a lot of night sweats, and we don't have hallucinogenic drugs, but we can really get kind of crazy. And so, but throughout this book is the theme of nature.
Yeah. I love that.
And so for me, nature is the best place for uncovering to take place, for re-selfing to take place, for expanded time, and for
freedom. And
it's like nature is the healing balm of Gilead. And if
maybe that's why I decided a few weeks ago to plant a garden.
Could very well be that. Yes. There's something about our connection to nature that we've lost, and our bodies are designed to be connected, and the earth will help heal us, and the trees and the wind and the streams. And our perimenopausal journey can be a healing through that experience. So I encourage women to, the Japanese have the terms called forest bathing, where you just go into the forest and you're not trying to do a 7-mile hike you just go in and allow the forest to bathe over you and the trees. And the Bible is so full of images of this. And I just came out of the forest camping a couple of days ago, and tall trees, tall trees. And just being at the bottom. I saw your
pictures.
That's a healing space. And I know, though, that for people of color, nature has not always been a safe space, especially in terms of being found out somewhere where no one can see what someone can do to you and your body and your life. So there is that, again, a history of trauma that is associated in unknown ways to that. So for people crossing the border right now, nature is a harsh environment. They will have trauma related to nature. So it's not always a good thing. It's not always a good memory. Lynching trees are not good memories. So that is what many people have to deal with, and I want to respect that. So, the gift of vision, what is it that, Frederick Buechner says, our calling, our vocation is where the world's needs and our joy meet. That space there where the world needs this, but I find great joy in this, and that's where they meet, and that may be your calling. And it doesn't have to be the second half of life calling. can be radically different, or it can be expanded in a different way. Or, they're always in the pilgrimage crossroads and twists and turns. So where we're going to go with that vision, I think, is how the Spirit is up to the Spirit leading us in our. But then the last chapter is the gift of courage.
Courage, yeah.
And that is, you've got to find that gift. And my grandchildren were talking about courage, and little Harper, who's just turned 9, she said, well, courage doesn't mean you don't have fear.
No.
Without fear, you don't really need courage. And it's...
and the way I put it is, courage is not the absence of fear.
Right.
Courage is going forward, facing your fears, and not allowing your fears to stop you.
Right. Not get paralyzed.
Yeah.
And too many women, I think, get paralyzed at midlife. And just, I know women who, it's almost like they don't have a reason for the second half of life that looks any different than the first half of life.
Oh. So wait a minute. So wait 1 second. You're moving a little fast there. I want to put a pin on that for a second. So you mean to tell me that the second half of life is not designed to look like the first half of life?
It can't, I think it can't be, I don't think it should be a radical discontinuity. You hear about the woman who just left everything and went out somewhere.
Yeah. I understand that.
But I do think that
be a repeat of the first half of life.
No, because we're not the first half of life people, and we think we are. Society wants us to be, when you go in a grocery store, the first section you come to is the flower and the fruit section.
Yeah.
And it's an eternal spring. And the world wants us to be always 30, 35. And that's why plastic surgeons make oodles of money. We want us to be the fruit and flower section of the grocery store.
Wow.
And we can't live there. It's not healthy to live there. And we age.
Yeah, keep on moving through the store because there's other things you need.
Exactly. You can't live off of that. And but too many women get trapped there, and they have this quest for youthfulness. And I also talk about being a grandmother is not the same as being a mother. And I know there are lots of grandparents, because of the opioid addiction and other things, that raise grandchildren. I realize that.
And in the African American community, a lot of our older African American women are raising their grandchildren.
Yeah. And so I do have a section for grandparents who are there on that. And even as a grandparent, you have to have more help, more resources than you did as just a young adult parent. Okay. And but we're not really designed to be parents at 70 and 65. We are parents of adult children, but not to have a 5-year-old. And so there are life circumstances where we don't have a choice. And I want to honor that, but also say that even in that case, we are different women, and we need to find some form of life outside of the maternal nest of care, and to look out as much as we can, as possible we can, to a world that's beckoning to us.
Wow. Cheryl, you're just such a wealth of knowledge and insight and inspiration. Time won't permit for us to go much deeper, but one of the things that you said in your book was that menopause leads to, you shared with us about how menopause can be a sacred space.
Yeah.
How it can be a communal space. that we can share that space, because a lot of times when we're going through midlife, or we hide, we isolate and things of that nature. But you talked to us about it being a safe space, a personal space, a communal space, and a sacred space for women.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I love that line in your book. It's a matter of fact, let me read it the way she wrote it. So you said here, because I highlighted it. It was one of the well, it's actually you uncovered each one. You said 7 Transforming Gifts of Menopause is designed to be a safe place where you can read, ponder, remember, pray, and cry. It's a deeply personal space, offering an opportunity for you to place your unique experiences in dialogue with with one another, probing your psyche, finding healing, and experiencing growth. Then you talked about it being a communal space, which I thought was really good. And that's why we're doing this podcast and why we're doing the Harmonize Your Life SelfCare Network, because we want to create a communal space for women to experience seasons of their lives, particularly seasons like menopause. And you called it a sacred space where we can discover a deep and mature relationship with God. And I really appreciate those metaphors of safe, deeply personal, communal, and sacred.
Yeah. If what if every woman had a space like that? If she had a community of women when she was going through menopause that would help her have a sisterhood, a sense of being in this together and supporting. And that's why I have in the book chapters for group discussion. Like if you form a seven gift group,
This would be a good book, by the way. As I was reading it, I was like, wow, this would be a good book. Maybe I'll use this book in tea time with Dr. Tony when we do our with my SelfCare Network. I do a group meeting once a month with them, and it's called Tea Time with Dr. Tony.
Yes, I've seen that.
And it's more than tea. Maybe would you mind coming into that meeting with us one time?
I would love to. I've often thought of asking you if I could just be part of it. But she let me in.
Yes, you can come in with us and lead us through maybe a group exercise or something. Because the interesting thing about our network is, and then I didn't design it to be, but I guess you attract who you are. And so I'm 58, and I don't know where I am in the menopause scene. I don't know. I did the perimenopause years ago. But a lot of the women in our group are in their 40s. The majority of them are in their 50s and 60s.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we even have some in their 70s.
Oh,
who
wow.
are part of this group. And so we're talking about these kind of the women who have come on our podcast, the women who are a part of our SelfCare Network, and many of the women in our SelfCare Network, they've taught and they've been guests on the podcast, and they share in our tea time meetings, because it's like a support group meeting. So those of you that are watching us, let me just put it on the screen. It's the Harmonize Your Life Women's SelfCare Network, and that is right there. You can find it on my website. Go to drtonyalvarado.com there, and you can join the network on my website. Just go there, click SelfCare Network, click join here, and sign up. And it's a membership organization, but it's very minimal. The fee to join is it's the cost of a cup of coffee at Starbucks, really. And not because of the value of it, but because I wanted to make it something that there wouldn't be a hardship on women to be a part of. And so we're there, and I started it in June of last year, and to date we have over 100, almost 120 women who are a part of the
Oh,
network.
that's wonderful. That's great.
Mhm. And then, you know, we do a retreat every year at the beginning of the year. This year, in January, we're going to Aruba with the retreat, and we start our year out in self-care with the retreat. We have the tea time meetings, we have the podcast, we have special fitness challenges that I put out for the women, because my goal is to see women
Wow, I need
healthy,
this group.
whole. Come on, join us. You can
I
join.
will. I've
Join
been
us.
thinking about
And my
asking you if
goal
you'd
is,
let me in.
yes, we will. Listen, it is open. It really is open. And I do want to see women whole. I want us to walk in our wholeness. I want us, no matter what stage of life we're in, menopausal, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, whatever. I want us to be whole, spirit, soul, and body. And a lot of it stems from my own journey through self-care and health and wellness and mental health and soul care and all of that. And so, and I'm still working through it. I'm in a journey right now with grief, and sometimes grief has its way with me, and I have to stop and let her have it her way, and then I reclaim myself and move on. And so, but I appreciate you, Cheryl. I just want to share with the women that are watching and us who you are. This is Dr. Cheryl Bridges Johns, and we are discussing her book, 7 Transforming Gifts of Menopause. You can follow Dr. Cheryl. You can find her on her website at CherylBJohns.com. She doesn't hang out on Instagram. She does hang out a little bit on Facebook, but she mostly hangs out on Twitter. That's her social media area or platform that she generally posts and tweets, and she has some really, really good stuff out there. So follow her. If you're not on Twitter, go on Twitter and follow Dr. Johns at CB_Johns there on Twitter. Cheryl, we're going to wrap up here, but do you have one last thing that you'd like to share? I'm going to come out of the studio a minute and just put the screen on you for a second and let you share a little bit.
Yeah, just one last word. In my book, I talk about how transformative and empowering and how wonderfully we can come through this period of life. But I know that for some women, it can be a living hell. And I just read a little piece written by a man whose wife a couple of years ago committed suicide. And so this man and his daughter, his adult daughter, wrote this piece about her horrible experience going through perimenopause, where she developed severe insomnia and for days and days and days on end could not sleep. And then what happens sometimes in healthcare, as many of us well know, is silos. You know, we don't get holistic healthcare. So somebody's treating the insomnia, somebody's treating this, and sometimes that can become almost a toxic mix. And they lamented that she didn't find a holistic caregiver to deal with all of the symptoms and everything that she was going through. She just wanted to sleep. She couldn't sleep. And so I talk about in my book, my strange desire I had in the very worst part of it was just to lie down somewhere and wrap myself up like a mummy and just let the wind and the sand blow over me and just disappear. If I could just disappear. And if we get to those places, it's always good to reach out, not just to maybe a healthcare provider but find some center of integrated medicine, get a good therapist, talk to some people who are healthy to talk to, and there's help out there for you if you experience the more severe effects of it.
Wow. Thank you, Cheryl. Mm-hmm. There's help out there for you. If you're experiencing severe effects of menopause, go get the help that you need. Get medical attention. See a doctor, a medical doctor. See a therapist. Get a coach. Get a spiritual director. Somebody
Oh,
that can help you
yes.
discern. Yeah, discern what God is even doing. Remember, one of the gifts is spiritual freedom.
That's
And
it.
so please do that. Do yourself a favor and take care of yourself. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I'm so grateful for all of you all that joined us this week for this conversation with my mentor, my friend, my colleague, Dr. Cheryl Bridges Johns. Follow my podcast. You find us there on Apple, Google, Spotify. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com. Join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. Join us on this journey. You don't have to walk this journey alone. God never designed us to walk any season of life alone, including seasons of menopause. Thank you. We'll see you again next week on the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast. See you soon. Hi, this is Dr. Tony Alvarado. I am so delighted about bringing the Harmonize Your Life podcast to you. Would you do me a favor? If you are enjoying this podcast, would you email me at hello@drtonyalvarado.com? I want to hear from you. I want your feedback. I want to know if there are any other topics that you are interested in as it relates to wellness, self-care, nutrition, or just overall bringing harmony into your life. Email me, contact me at hello@drtonyalvarado.com.